views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try when...
Hello, this is Patty Hunter of Patty's Page. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Kayleen Reusser, and she is an author, as you can see, where she's holding up right now a wonderful book. She just recently did that. When was its release?
This was released in early June 6th of 2019, because of the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings, which would have been June 6th of 1944.
Oh, it's a long time.
75 years.
75 years. My dad was in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and he was a navigator, short order cook, and teacher of mathematics. So
Very good.
I have something in common with your husband.
Yes, you do.
So where were you born and raised then?
I was born and raised in Bluffton, Indiana, so south of Fort Wayne a little bit. I've lived there all my life. I've been a mother, 3 grown children, and my husband and I are, well, he's retired, and that enables him to help me do things because I'm not yet retired. I'm working pretty hard on my books.
You mean I'm older
and
than
speaking. He's very helpful. He does everything he can to help me. He's retired Air Force, and our son is in the Air Force, so writing about veterans and our national history is what I do to support our military and preserve our national heritage.
I have a solid respect for the Navy and the Air Force and the Army, because they're doing an awesome job, dangerous job to help free our country.
Yes.
Canada went through the same thing during the Second World War. So we didn't get drafted, we just volunteered in our country.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Good to know.
So you still live, where do you still live, in Bluffton?
Yes, we do.
So it's far from where you were raised?
No, just about 4 or 5 miles.
Oh. So what schools did you attend while growing up?
I attended Bluffton High School, and then I did go to Taylor University at Upland, and then graduated. I transferred, and then got a degree from IPFW here in Fort Wayne.
Purdue?
Purdue, yes.
Hey, we just lived
Yes. Psychology.
Psychology. Have I got to start? No. So you majored in
Psychology.
Do you practice it?
Well, I practice it when I'm writing and interviewing people, because one thing I always was fascinated by is what makes people think certain ways or act certain ways, what motivates them. So one question I've asked thousands of people through thousands of interviews I've done over 28 years now of writing is, why did you do such and such? Why did you make 100 dresses out of pillowcases for little girls from Africa? This lady was in her mid-80s and doing something like that. I mean, that's just one example. But I've asked that of all the veterans, why did you enlist in the Army during World War II? Especially the women.
Yeah.
That was always a big question.
They had to do something to
They
help
wanted
the
to help.
economy. And what did the women that set both world wars do while their men were fighting?
Now, do you mean when they were in the military or at home?
At home.
At home, well, a lot of them were Rosie the Riveters, where they took over jobs that men had left to when they got drafted or enlisted and went overseas. Those jobs were open for welders, electricians, any kind of war munitions. So I've just interviewed a Rosie a few weeks ago, and she will be in my next book, which will be out at the end of the summer.
Do you have pictures of her?
I do. Now, not at work, because back then they didn't think that those kind of pictures would be that interesting. But I do have one of her at the time that she was doing that.
Wow. You must have been through a lot of interviews with a lot of
I do.
veterans.
I do. I've done 250 World War II interviews. Now, that's besides interviews with Korea, Vietnam,
Right.
post 9/11, and then everybody in between, whoever I can get to talk to me about their service.
And who was the oldest one that you interviewed?
Would have been a lady who was 101.
No.
She was 101 when I interviewed her and lived to be almost 102. And she went on the honor flight just a few weeks before her 102nd birthday.
Wow.
So she got to go on that, and then I think she passed away 2 weeks later. So she had a fascinating story. I'd almost like to write a book just about her.
She's seen automobile, horse and buggy,
Yes.
automobiles, to the moon.
Yeah. Well, she was a professional nurse before World War II started.
Right.
And when the doctor that she worked for closed his practice to enlist and to go overseas, then she thought, well, I might as well do the same. So she ended up getting married overseas to an American.
Right.
And then came back, and I just found that she kept a diary, so that was, and took a lot of photos.
I have a diary too.
I just love reading
know where
those
it
kinds
is.
of notes.
I think what she has done is a revolutionary.
Yes, oh, she definitely
Like
was.
a pioneer.
Yes, the word I use for any of the women who enlisted in any branch is plucky.
Lucky.
Because that was a man's war. They weren't supposed to be wearing pants, and many times it was their own family members who were telling them they shouldn't be doing it, including their mothers. They were saying, oh, that's not very feminine, that's not what a girl should do.
Too conditioned. But
And
nowadays,
yes, well, they were coming out, the Victorian era even,
Yeah.
but the women said that it was a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were able to live off of what they earned because they had uniforms, a lot of them were given their food, so they were able to send money back home to help their families who were being rationed.
the women that went to war, were a lot of them killed, or were they just away from the battlefield?
The women I've interviewed were not in danger, I'll say, but they were. I've never, unfortunately, been able to interview anyone who was a nurse on a battlefield. Now, they were not allowed to be in combat during World War II, but they could have been a nurse close to the line. But I have never had that opportunity. Mainly, it's probably because I didn't get started soon enough.
Right.
And I've often lamented that I wish I would have started earlier. But you know what? We all have regrets about something. And my thinking is, at least I did start. And I've gotten 250 we wouldn't have had if I hadn't at least started.
So you have a raft of books here.
I do. Well, if you don't mind, we'll just go through the World War II ones first,
Yes.
and then I'll start with my children's books because I've written 17 of those. So this
Oh my
is
goodness.
a series of books I have. I'll go this way. 3 books that I called the World War II Legacies series because this is a series of just the stories of the men and women who I've interviewed, of the 250. Now each book has women in them, but I'll have to say there's not near as many women as men. But so I've got about, 28 in the first book, 34 in each of books 2 and 3. And the photos on all the covers are from the veterans in the books.
Right.
So, of course, 1 and 3 have the actual photos. Book 2 this is a C-47 up here that was actually from the 101-year-old that I talked about.
Wow.
And another one, I should say. And then this down here is a picture of Okinawa after the battle there.
Oh, black and
So
white.
the reason I put their photos on the covers was because I believe these books are about them and for them. I believe so
In honor of
strongly
them.
in honor of them. This gal up here, I have to mention that this gal right here is one I took on the honor flight. So we took her when she was 95, and she is 98 now, still living. And I get to see her quite often. I go to visit her, and she was very, very sweet that day. And then this book, book 2, has 2 stories of men who my husband and I also took on the honor flight. They were both in the Army, and my man was 95 at the time. He was a soldier with Patton's Third Army, so he helped to liberate Buchenwald, in fact. And then my husband's man that he took, his veteran, served as a medic in the Aleutians, which was Alaska. So a lot of people didn't even know we had people up there. So it's all, every story is an adventure.
So have you talked to other countries who are in the war itself, or just the United States?
Well, actually, not in these books. These are all Americans, and the reason, well, just because of the proximity. And I actually made an effort to put the word American in the titles so that people would be aware of that.
Yeah.
But the new book I'm working on, I have interviewed people, not soldiers from other countries, but people who were civilians in other countries who survived the war, and many of them were children at the time. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's my new book that I'm talking about.
But when you do a new book, you can come back and
I hope so. You want me to show you my children's books now?
Book?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've got several children's books, and you had asked about Malala, so I will mention her.
I've always been admiring her.
She was a very young girl who was shot by the Taliban in the head, a deliberate attack, and she was very brave about it. And I've listened to many, many, many speeches that she has given, and I marveled because she was just a teenager, a young girl, giving talks to the United Nations and so on. And I do, I'm pretty impressed with that. She has won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
So quite amazing. And I still think we're going to be hearing about her in the future. She's going to be, I think, a leader.
She's on a roll now.
Yeah. And then this is a book that is one of my 17 that is not a biography. I've done probably about 7 biographies.
Non-fiction or fiction?
These are all nonfiction.
Really?
Well, the reason is because I tell people that I think real people are so interesting, I don't need to make up anybody. Now, I read fiction, but I really like writing about people who are inspiring, because for kids especially, they need role models. They need good role models. So,
especially with the dysfunctional families.
Oh gosh, there's
only
just
moms or dads.
more and more need for that. So it's getting harder to find them, actually.
Yeah.
But this is called a STEM book. This is not a biography. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Math. So it's the fields that they're needing more people to go into. We especially want to encourage girls to go into it. But this is all about a book. It's a book about how Golden Gate Bridge came about, its history, and how it was built. So it's got a lot of elements to it. It's going to have the history. It's going to have the construction, the delays, the economics, because this was actually constructed during the Depression in the 30s, which is just amazing to me. I had no idea. It is published by Purple Toad. Both of them are.
That's your publishing company?
It is. It's one I've been working with for several years now. I did some additional books with an earlier publisher. So this is something I'm looking at doing with my World War II subject as well. Putting some books together about World War II. So for kids. And then I've had several stories in Chicken Soup books, which that's a lot of fun to do because you can really pour your heart out. In the other books, I'm not writing about me, but in the Chicken Soup books, those are all written first person. So you want to think about some topic that has impressed you over the years.
Who has impressed you?
Yes,
and
yes.
what they have done to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
And help other people, and sacrificial, big hearts, you know, whatever it takes. So this story was actually one that I had read about on my church's missionary bulletin board,
Right.
and it was a newsletter that this woman had put out, and I thought, oh my goodness, that just sounds like something we all need to learn. So do you want me to read it, or do we have time?
Do we have time? Yeah, we have time.
Okay, it's called A Purpose in Death. The horrific news of my husband's death immobilized me. Matt was riding a moped in downtown Cayenne de Oro in the Philippines, where we were missionaries, when a jeepney bus veered out of traffic and hit him. Numb with grief, I made arrangements for his funeral. It is customary in the Philippines for Christians to hold services of hope at the church each night preceding the burial. These meetings are a combination evangelistic and memorial service with beautiful singing. While I was standing at the first evening's service of hope, trying bravely to greet all the people who had been affected by Matt's death, a thought came to me. One person had been forgotten, the driver of the jeepney. I knew Philippine law stated that if someone causes another person's death, the guilty party is jailed until the matter is fully investigated. According to the law, if a victim's family asks for the prisoner's release, it will be granted. I spoke with one of the church leaders who volunteered to go to the prison the next day and sign papers stating that I wanted the driver released. The next night at the service, more people came to express their condolences. A man with his head held low made his way to where I was standing. Without a word, he gripped my hand. Tears streamed down his face. I knew he was the driver of the jeepney that had killed Matt. I motioned to a church member who knew several dialects, and with his help, I told the driver I did not hold him accountable for Matt's death. I'm happy for your release from prison, I said, trying not to cry. The driver's eyes widened. His lips parted in a smile so brilliant I couldn't help smiling back. My husband was a Christian, I explained. He loved the Filipino people so much that he chose to live here to tell them about God's love. Then he added, "Would you like to learn more about God's love and forgiveness?" The man shook his head and left the church. I didn't expect to see him again. The next night, at the last service of hope, the man again approached me, this time accompanied by his wife and 3 sisters. All 4 women sobbed noisily on my shoulder, crying their gratitude for their loved one's release from prison. The jeepney driver and his family attended Matt's funeral that next day. Matt's parents told him that they too forgave him and believed that God had a purpose in Matt's death. The driver and his family began attending church regularly, bringing a jeepney filled with people from his barrio. On the day that they eventually accepted Jesus into their lives, I thought, only he could take a vessel like a jeepney that had brought death and use it to bring people to him. I praised God, and I knew in heaven Matt was praising God too. And that's the story of Peggy Littell, and as told to me.
That was beautiful. Beautiful.
I have a couple Christian writing clubs in the area that I also help people with. So if somebody
Is it in
has a
Fort Wayne?
story, yep, we have one in Fort Wayne. It meets at the Waynedale Public Library. And then I have one in Bluffton, Indiana. And if anybody's interested, they could contact me by, I'm on Facebook, or I have a website, which is a good time to give it. Could I go ahead and give it? KayleenReusser.com. That's KayleenReusser.com. And I'd be glad to invite people to attend.
So you write, like you said, children's books.
Yes.
I write lyrics for children's
Do I what?
songs.
Oh,
write
yes.
lyrics.
Okay, you said that. Uh-huh.
After this, I can show you my latest that was done by someone from Toronto, Matt Gerber. He was the one that put it together. I made the lyrics. He sang it for me.
Oh.
It's called 2 Little Owls.
Oh.
Anyways, so, yeah. My dad, he himself was from Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
Then he left to go to war early. He was about 20, 21. and he was there for a while. He was in one of those airplanes, the scout plane,
Oh, yeah.
to look for U-boats. And he never saw action, which thank God. But his friends saw action, and he was one of the few that came home. A whole bunch, like 20 or 30 of his friends. Not very many came back. And he went from east to west in Canada because he just couldn't settle down. It was traumatic. So he met my mom. And she was German.
Oh,
Anyways, Prussian, whatever the word.
okay.
And during that time, she was blacklisted during the war. She could not work, and neither could my aunt, because of her being German. But someone at the newspaper in Saskatchewan, Swift Current, felt sorry for her, so she became the night clerk. And Monty Hall was one of the people who worked for her as a, delivering papers.
Oh.
Monty Hall.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
So that's quite a story I could tell you. Really. So there's a picture of him right there.
Okay.
That's my papa.
Mm-hmm.
He died 12 years ago. He was 88 at the time. So I miss him.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, when she was 68, back in 1980, she passed. So they had a lot of stories about what had happened in the Second World War, and we learned a lot from the Canadian history, and now I'm learning from the American history.
I just have no end of interest in it.
Yeah.
I mean, we listen to a lot of documentaries, but the best is getting them firsthand, from the actual people who were there. And they're not going to be here much longer, unfortunately, but I feel very blessed and privileged to have interviewed all of them, and many of them actually are friends of ours now.
Where do your interviews go into? I mean,
I go to their homes or where they live.
And what do you put them in?
I put them in books. Is that what you mean, the
Books
stories?
as well as...
I did have a column here in the News Sentinel before it closed from 2015 to 2018. It ran every other Monday. It was a World War II column. We had to start using Korean War because I couldn't find enough World War II then, near the end, and then of course the newspaper closed. So we couldn't do that anymore.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
They're quite important to have.
I think so.
Now they're no longer... Are they just... Who are they with now? Who are the people who work there at News Center?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh my goodness. I know Blake Sebring.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed him as well.
Nice guy.
And I know Kevin Leidinger.
Okay.
Leidinger. How do you pronounce him?
Leininger.
Leidinger.
Okay.
He's been on my show.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think I got a lot of people on my show. Anyways, this is towards the end of this show. I would love to have you back again.
Okay.
Do you know when that latest?
Well, my deadline is to have the book in hand by August 30th. So I'm daily working on it, and most of the writing is done at this point. I've got the photos. Now comes the hard part. I like the writing and interviewing and all that, and putting it all together gets to be sticky, but I've got a couple people I hired to help me. So they make it go very smoothly.
So what prompted you to do children's books?
Well, the children's books were first. I started with those in 2009. Yes, I've been doing those since 2009.
Right.
Now the World War II books came about. The first one was in 2014. So those have been later. Yeah. But I had so much interest given to me by people who were reading them that I decided to put more books. In fact, this gal right here is from the Leo Grable area. Her name is Margaret Ringenberg. A lot of people know her, would have heard her speak. She did a lot of speaking. She is in Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's profiled in there. This man is from Bern. He's from Decatur. He was from Fort Wayne. He was from Fort Wayne. And then I do have photos on the backs as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to keep the books centered on the vets who are in the book, because I want to, I'll just go ahead and show you.
Oh, you see
This
the
is
picture?
Margaret's
Wow.
picture here. There she is with Tom Brokaw.
Oh my goodness.
Just happens to be the one I
Tom
opened.
Brokaw.
Yeah.
You see still around?
I think so, yeah. This is Roger Myers. He had helped with the museum there at the airport. And I always, as often as possible, try to get a picture of them
That's good.
in uniform.
Put a
And
face.
yes, and then I take a picture of them, the
Natural.
current,
Yeah.
so that people can see, what they look like. And now this guy, he would have been married, so his wife traveled around the country with him. Now this first book is mostly people from Northeast Indiana. It's Adams, Allen, Wells, Huntington, and Whitley counties. But then books 2 and 3, I did go outside of Northeast Indiana a little bit. So I've got Valparaiso, Vincennes, Indianapolis. And then the third book, I actually have 6 states represented in this
Wow.
one. 6 states.
So you're branching out? so
Well,
to
it's
speak?
because they're hard to find.
Oh,
Yeah, they're getting harder to find, so yes, I do.
They're dying
And as
out.
often as possible, I do try to talk to them in person.
yes.
I had to do a couple here via FaceTime, phone, even Skype, but it works, as long as they're hearing is good enough, so.
Gee, I'm glad you came along.
Thank you, thank you.
I like picking people's brains.
I do too. And you know what I've found? They often say, oh, I don't have much of a story, or I can't remember much. But if they're willing and able for me to talk with them,
You
I'll
really
start.
believe what comes out.
And they're surprised. They're surprised at what they remember. And they'll always say, well, if you can put this into a story, that would be great. Because they think it's just a bunch of hodgepodge. But, I do that. I just take whatever, and I don't want them to be under stress
Right.
of what they're
What
trying to
happened,
remember.
yeah.
I just say whatever
Just
you can remember is
natural.
fine. And one other thing they've told me, many of them say don't glamorize the war. And I said I wouldn't even know how to do that. All I do is put in here what you tell me.
Right.
So it's filled with their quotes and
It's
their
not
information.
glamorized, it's death and war.
It is.
And my dad had the medals. I don't know where they are now, but I'm going to see if I can go get new copies of what Dad had
Mm-hmm.
sent from Ottawa, Ontario. So I don't know how much it cost,
Mm-hmm.
but he had a whole array of wings and stuff. But I was proud of my dad. He did good.
Sure.
And I'm proud of all people who were in the Air Force and all the other parts of the military.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you and you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for,
Oh, sorry.
that's all right.
Forgot about that. Okay, we'll do it this hand. Okay.
Thank you for coming on to my
Thank you.
show, Kaylee. This is Patty Hunter. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week with a new story.
Godspeed, my love, until we meet again. You're always in my heart and every dream. Don't let this time apart give in to all our fears. God will keep us close from up above. So until we meet again, Godspeed, my love. God is with us always for the rest of our lives.